Absence. Absence. Most people think of the cultures represented in the collection in terms of the absence of advanced technology. Accommodate. Accommodate. This site is in the countryside and so would be able to accommodate a lot of car parking. Abundant. Abundant. Once out there, skilled seafarers would have detected abundant leads to follow to land. Abstract. Abstract. Around this time, Moore moved away from the human figure to experiment with abstract shapes. Adverse. Adverse. However, smallholder farmers in developing countries must, in addition, deal with adverse environments. Accumulate. Accumulate. Most of the sediment with its natural fertilizer accumulated up above the dam. Academic. Academic. There have been centuries of academic debate over the origins of the coconut. Ailment. Ailment. Cinnamon was also reported to have health benefits and was thought to cure various ailments such as indigestion. Acid. Acid. Acid rain is responsible for rainforest destruction. Accelerate. Accelerate. And the data confirms that the rate at which these diseases are declining continues to accelerate. Airborne. Airborne. Judging from the way it watches and tracks airborne flying fish, it can apparently see fairly well through the air-water interface as well. Advisable. Advisable. This is particularly advisable when dealing with complicated matters where you don't want to give a rushed answer. Accessible. Accessible. The city centre is just a 5-minute walk from the college, easily accessible in lunch or study breaks. Alcohol. Alcohol. The preservative used is usually ethylene glycol or propylene glycol, as alcohol will evaporate quickly. Artifact. Artifact. Many of the artifacts are associated with hunting. Accompany. Accompany. The road improvements and accompanying maintenance system had helped make the district centre accessible throughout the year. Alert. Alert. The cleverly concealed drugs don't fool super sniffer Florence, and her persistent scratching of the case alerts her handler. Attain. Attain. The challenge, therefore, is to attain a sustainable balance between population, economic growth, and the environment. Accomplish. Accomplish. In setting up the Nobel Foundation and the Nobel Peace Prizes, he hoped to accomplish what he had not been able to do during his lifetime. Alien. Alien. There is considerable debate over how we should react if we detect a signal from an alien civilization. Audit. Audit. Auditing, accountancy and taxation from small businesses to large corporations are given at all times. Account. Account. Today, it accounts for roughly half of all cork production around the world. Amass. Amass. Huge investments have been made in new systems, information technology, and amassing quality assurance accreditations. Aspiration. Aspiration. These trends are influencing consumers' aspirations, attitudes, and behaviours. Accurate. Accurate. It's hard to get an accurate description of what the dodo actually looked like. Anxiety. Anxiety. And interacting with something we don't understand can cause anxiety and give us a sense that we're losing control. Avenue. Avenue. Clean coal is another avenue for improving fuel conversion efficiency. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. The book also acknowledges that our attitude towards bacteria is not a simple one. Approve. Approve. The supervisor must approve all overtime before overtime occurs. Ban. Ban. Quite often, governments try to kill off a minority language by banning its use in public or discouraging its use in schools, all to promote national unity. Acoustic. Acoustic. Why are they so active in the period preceding the acoustic climax? Array. Array. When asked how they had cracked the code ahead of an array of highly accomplished rival investigators, he said something that stunned me. Band. Then there'll be a performance by a band. Acquisition. The acquisition of literacy necessitated a new circuit in our species' brain more than 6,000 years ago. Authentic. Written and oral course with simulation exercises using authentic newspaper advertisements. Behalf. She's got plenty of contacts in the town and will deal with the agencies on your behalf. Activate. Each of the floats is dropped in the ocean from a boat at a set point and activated from a satellite. Automatic. On enrolment, all students receive automatic membership to the social club and public speaking club. Beneath. As we walked beneath the Quetzalcoatlus model in Santa Monica, Macready pointed out its similarity to sailplanes. Adapt. After this technique had been invented, it was only a matter of time before weapons designers adapted it for the detection of submarines. Autonomy. As has just been remarked, in a liberal society, basic health is seen as one of the indispensable conditions for the exercise of personal autonomy. Blend. The coloured T-shirts are made from cotton and polyester blend. Adequate. It is also accepted that this right generates an obligation of duty for the state to ensure that adequate healthcare resources are provided out of the public purse. Beforehand, several months were devoted to planning, and there was also a training period of approximately 6 months. Border. Foreign markets now tempt businesses that never much worried about sales beyond their nation's borders. Adjust. As their eyes adjusted to the darkness, they saw myriad lights reflecting off the water. Blast. By studying this evidence, volcanologists can read the force of the great blasts of the past. Bow. They had from 1 to 3 masts with large square sails and a small triangular sail at the bow. Administration. I've been working in the administration section of the local hospital. Bolt. Architects love it because large panels can be bolted together to make transparent walls, and turning it into ceilings and floors is almost as easy. Bullet. In reaction to the backward discharge of bullets, the gun, and hence the boat, move forwards. Adopt. England was one of the first countries where scientists adopted and publicised Copernican ideas with enthusiasm. Bother. I'm sorry to bother you so early, Mrs. Smith, but I wonder if you could help me. Calibrate, which itself can be calibrated to give an indication of the length of time since these populations last interbred. Advent. According to archaeological evidence, at least 5,000 years ago, and long before the advent of the Roman Empire, the Babylonians began to measure time. Bound. Global warming is bound to affect rainfall patterns, though there is considerable disagreement about its precise effects. Canvas. As this is a travelling circus, it follows a long tradition by performing in a marquee, which is really like a canvas portable building. Adventure. It is a first-class suspense adventure, which also looks at the human condition, although this is not always a successful part of the film. Buffet. We'll be serving you a buffet lunch. Capitalism. Capitalism. The economist Adam Smith's theories on capitalism were significantly influenced by the Stoicism. Advocate. Advocate. Instead, the proposal advocated the creation of urban villages at hundreds of sites, mostly around railway stations. Captive. Captive. The area around the blowhole is also particularly sensitive, and captive animals often object strongly to being touched there. Cautious. Cautious. If they truly are cautious, then I suspect they will seek to shut down some of their shops. Effect. Effect. Is it possible that the external environment can affect a guest's well-being? Catalogue. Catalogue. If you do get stuck looking for things, you should ask the relevant cataloguing assistant. Cement. Cement. The diagrams below show the stages and equipment used in the cement-making process and how cement is used to produce concrete for building purposes. Ceremony. Ceremony. Particularly interesting are a series of collections which continue to document the evolution of ceremony. Collate. Collate. Finally, the Student Union Committee collated the results and drew up a report. Alter. Alter. The Dutch began to alter the harvesting practices of the Ceylonese. Circular. Circular. This hat is based on a circular stairway in an old building in London. Commence. Commence. 9 scholarships of $3,000 per annum for the duration of the course to the most outstanding students commencing any advanced certificate course. Altitude. Altitude. The same has happened to the altitude tent developed by Australian Institute of Sports to replicate the effect of altitude training at sea level. Clarity. Clarity. We knew we had to think about clarity, organisation, and so on. Commentary. Commentary. Transcriptions always benefit from any additional commentary provided by an observer. Analyse. Analyse. After we've gathered our information, we must analyse it. Classification. Classification. This classification is commonly used in forestry and horticulture. Compact. Compact. Films and compact discs cost little to transport, even by aeroplane. Anthropology. Anthropology. Anthropology, at its broadest, is the study of humanity. Clientele. Clientele. If they see potential clientele going elsewhere, they might want to be able to offer a similar service. Compile. Compile. A representative sample of language compiled for the purpose of linguistic analysis is known as a corpus. Anticipate. Anticipate. Products have now been developed which can convey more information than Shannon had anticipated as possible. Cluster. Cluster. Their villages were little more than clusters of thatched huts. Comprehend. Comprehend. Autistic spectrum disorders often result in major difficulties in comprehending verbal information and speech processing. Apparent. Apparent. It became apparent that smell can evoke strong emotional responses. Commit. Commit. Children who are bullied are twice as likely to commit suicide as the average person. Compromise. Compromise. Lack of sleep, however, can compromise the immune system, muddle thinking, cause depression, promote anxiety, and encourage irritability. Appeal. Appeal. It appealed to young people who were keen to improve their physical fitness. Conceal. Conceal. If a few grams of a drug are well concealed, even the best dogs will miss them. Conceive. Conceive. Originally, they were conceived as short stories. Early producers doubted the ability of audiences to concentrate for more than the length of a reel. Applicant. Applicant. Note that applicants need to apply for this scholarship on the Concrete. Concrete. It is hard to make concrete predictions about the future. Concession. Concession. An elderly person who is also studying full-time receives a concession of 25%. Appraisal. Appraisal. For managers, this means that employees must have the capability of doing the job and must regard the appraisal process as valid. Confidential. Confidential. Legal proceedings may be initiated for any misuse or unauthorized disclosure of such confidential information. Confine. Confine. The work of the Women's Social and Political Union, WSPU, was mainly confined to London and the South. Appreciation. Appreciation. His journal entries of the time reveal a much more gradual appreciation of his achievement. Confirmation. Confirmation. Attached to the booking confirmation will be a note showing the balance due on your holiday and the date by which it is payable. Consciousness. Consciousness. The new consciousness that there were also severe limits to healthcare resources was part of this general revelation of the obvious. Apprenticeship. Apprenticeship.
Their role is to provide help and support throughout your apprenticeship.
Confront. Confront. Adults and children are frequently confronted with statements about the alarming rate of loss of tropical rainforests. Constrain. Constrain. Reduced operation of the machinery should limit their production and thereby constrain the damage. Approach. Approach. The suggestopedic approach to foreign language learning provides a good illustration. Consensus. Consensus. The overwhelming consensus was that virtually all the teacher subjects would refuse to obey the experimenter. Controversy. Controversy. And in fact, such controversy has surrounded pterosaurs since the first discovery of one in the early 1700s. Appropriate. Appropriate. The students have not developed the appropriate mindset. Consolidation. Consolidation.
The past 2 or 3 years have seen consolidation.
Convenience. Convenience. The convenience of this approach makes it widely used, and it is considered the norm in the generative approach to linguistics. Approximate. Approximate. What would you say? I think you can be approximate. Contend. Contend. Rather, they contend, it was almost certainly the result of climatic shifts. Cookery. Cookery. I'm taking a month's cookery course at a local college. Archaeology. Archaeology. Archaeology involves creativity as well as careful investigative work. Convention. Convention. In addition, it could be argued that the practice of interpreting or reading each medium follows different conventions. County. County. There are 56 hill figures scattered around England, with the vast majority on the chalk downlands of the country's southern counties. Architect. Architect. Toughened glass is favoured by architects because it is much stronger than ordinary glass. Correspond. Correspond. Because audiences continue to exist for a product which corresponds to needs which Hollywood could not supply. Coverage. Coverage. This is surprising considering the high level of media coverage on this issue. Arctic. Arctic. With so much at stake, the Inuit are determined to play a key role in teasing out the mysteries of climate change in the Arctic. Craft. Craft. The viewer sees not an actor working on his craft, but another human being struggling with life. Cradle. Cradle. Using a studio camera, a photographer went up in a cradle to take photos of every pane. Arise. Arise. The self is essentially a social structure, and it arises in social experience. Criterion. Criterion. Tolerance to shade is one criterion for the classification of plants in forestry and horticulture. Crude. Crude. Other than bows, arrows and crude digging sticks, the only tools the Sirionos seemed to possess were 2 machetes worn to the size of pocket knives. Arousal. Arousal. Energy and arousal levels may need to be retuned in the blink of an eye. Curiosity. Curiosity. Furthermore, research has shown that while every child is born with a natural curiosity, it can be suppressed dramatically during the 2nd and 3rd years of life. Crush. Crush. Aggregates makes a product for roads, and 30% of the material is crushed glass. Arrange. Arrange. The hospital arranges for someone to come along and measure the level of sugar in your blood. Cushion. Cushion. Traditionally, high jumpers would land in pits filled with sawdust, but by Fosbury's time, sawdust pits had been replaced by soft foam cushions, ideal for flopping. Declaration. Declaration. The writer thinks that the declaration, "There is no bullying at this school," reflected the school's lack of concern. Artificial. Artificial. Before the invention of artificial light, the moon had greater social impact. Consumerism. Consumerism. The third main area that saw changes that contributed to consumerism was retailing. Decode. Decode. That circuit evolved from a very simple mechanism for decoding basic information, like the number of goats in one herd, to the present, highly elaborate reading brain. Ash. Ash. Rain washed these deposits, along with wood ashes, down into the clay soil along the River Tiber. Deadly. Deadly. The deadliest weapon is not government policy, but economic globalization. Defense. Defense. Developed most probably as a defense against forest fires, the bark of the cork oak has a particular cellular structure. Assess. Assess. He asked both expert musicians and non-experts to assess 6 compositions. Deliberately. Deliberately. These were brought to the island deliberately, but the ships also brought another type of creature, rats. Definite. Definite. First thing, numbers. Have we got anything definite? Assign. Assign. The next factor to be determined is whether the goals should be assigned by a manager or collectively set in conjunction with the employees. Delicate. Delicate. This new find near the Bavarian town of Solnhofen contained delicate wing impressions, establishing definitely that the extinct reptile was capable of flight. Deforestation. Deforestation. More important are the deforestation and impacts on water supplies arising from the need to provide tourists with cooked food and hot showers. Assist. Assist. That general declaration was accompanied by 6 detailed resolutions to assist national policy making. Digest. Digest. The digested dung in these burrows is an excellent food supply for the earthworms, which decompose it further to provide essential soil nutrients. Democratic. Democratic. The current trend towards blurring these role signs in dress is probably democratic, but it also makes some people very insecure. Associate. Associate. John Prescott, an associate professor at the University of Chicago, suggests that this 5th taste serves a purpose just as the other tastes do. Discrepancy. Discrepancy. Any discrepancies should be raised with your staff coordinator immediately. Demonstration. Demonstration. There'll be a demonstration of traditional dances from all round the country. Assumption. Assumption. The assumption that the tropical ecosystem of Amazonia has been created solely by natural forces has been shown to be incorrect by recent research. Dismiss. Dismiss. This was done by transfers without replacing the persons who left. No one was to be dismissed. Designate. Designate.
Lozanov is categoric in insisting that the suggestopedic session be conducted exactly in the manner designated by trained and accredited suggestopedic teachers.
Attribute. Attribute. Djoser is thought to have reigned for 19 years, but some historians and scholars attribute a much longer time for his rule. Dispense. Dispense. Like any placebo, it must be dispensed with authority to be effective. Desperate. Desperate. Doctors were desperate for a way to stop the spread of the disease, and they decided nutmeg held the cure. Auditorium. Auditorium. Will audiences find any difference in the auditorium? Displace. Displace. They set their sights on displacing the Portuguese as kings of cinnamon. Destructive. Destructive. The weakened fall leaf then becomes vulnerable to the highly destructive effects of the oxygen. Authority. Authority. In a sociological explanation, personal values are more powerful than authority. District. District. I'll start with a brief history of the district and then focus on life in the first half of the 20th century. Deteriorate. Deteriorate. Cotman believes this hormone may prevent the brains of active humans from deteriorating. Available. Available. I'm afraid this service is only available to full-time students. Drain. Drain. Huge quantities of water are consumed because used water from sewage pipes, storm drains and factories is merely flushed away and discharged into rivers. Discharge. Discharge. The ideas of forcing storm clouds to discharge their lightning on command is not new. Award. Award. All students receive a transcript of results and relevant award documentation when they end their studies with the college. Duplicate. Duplicate. These methods include strength training that duplicates what they are doing in their running events, as well as plyometrics. Dismantle. Dismantle. Moreover, the problem of oversensitivity to light is even more acute in the fall, when the leaf is busy preparing for winter by dismantling its internal machinery. Back. Back. Deals is leading a project which is backed by EPRI to try to use lasers to discharge lightning safely. Dweller. Dweller. Australia's native dung beetles are scrub and woodland dwellers. Disrupt. Disrupt. Seasonal affective disorder is disrupting children's education in Russia. Batch. Batch. However, the company's retailing manager will be interested to hear from people who have consumed chicken curry from any of the above batch numbers. Emit. Emit. Throughout its time as a larva, approximately 15 months, the glowworm emits a bright light. Dive. Dive. A lot of their work comes down to measurement, everything from the exact angle of a swimmer's dive to the second-by-second power output of a cyclist. Battery. Battery. There are plenty of anecdotes describing how glowworms have been used as emergency bicycle lamps when a cyclist's batteries have failed without warning. Enclose. Enclose. As proof of your citizenship and identity, you must enclose either your passport or your birth certificate. Dock. Dock. In the 16th century, the first dock was dug where ships were constructed. Beam. Beam. The idea was that a person acting as a sender would attempt to beam the image over to the receiver. Erect. Erect. Despite its pioneering technology, no eyewitness accounts are known which describe the iron bridge being erected, and certainly no plans have survived. Elaborate. Elaborate. Others are more elaborate, with long-stepped passages leading to the water via several stories. Bare. Bare. Rarely do patients see nurses use a tablet not bearing a pharmaceutical company's logo. Evident. Evident. Healthcare came to be seen as a right at about the same time that the limits of healthcare resources became evident. Endure. Endure. It was Pasteur's germ theory that gave bacteria the poor image that endures today. Behave. Behave. Managers often behave very differently outside the office. Exaggerate. Exaggerate. And finally, most forms of environmental pollution appear to have been exaggerated. Entail. Entail. The work entailed the processing of accounts and generating of invoices. Bend. Bend. At that time, local craftsmen first built an iron forge just behind the village here on the bend in the river. Excess. Excess. They had to be able to sail near the coast, which is why they had no ballast or excess load and were built with a long, narrow hull. Enthusiasm. Enthusiasm. England was one of the first countries where scientists adopted and publicised Copernican ideas with enthusiasm. Bilingual. Bilingual. With a bilingual informant, or through use of an interpreter, it is possible to use translation techniques. Exert. Exert. When the interior finally solidifies and shrinks, it exerts a pull on the outer layer that leaves it in permanent compression and produces a tensile force inside the glass. Episode. Episode. It is in this phase that sleepwalking can occur, with an average episode lasting no more than 15 minutes. Booklet. Booklet. This is a classic booklet suitable for both beginner and expert. Explicit. Explicit. On the other hand, music is a purely abstract art form devoid of language or explicit ideas. Excursion. Excursion. Social activities, including a welcome buffet and a half-day excursion round Bingham. Boost. Boost. This policy would also greatly boost catches in the surrounding seas. Faith. Faith. They're important because they can undermine the faith of the public in the business world. Exemplify. Exemplify. The quotations in the box at the beginning of the article exemplify the effects of SKI. Boredom. Boredom. Pupils are less likely to be led into bullying from boredom or frustration. Fantastic. Fantastic. The other really fantastic thing is that children get to know the adults in the street. It's like having a big extended family. Expenditure. Expenditure. Phase 1 of MARTP consisted of a survey of household expenditure on transport. Branch. Branch. It is only available to students from the college's overseas branch. Fare. Fare. The research suggests that older people fare best when they feel independent but know they can get help when they need it. Exterior. Exterior. All exterior doors in this especially noisy pocket will have to be solid core wood doors with hinges. Branding. Branding. But translating corporate philosophies into the right mix of colour, style, degree of branding and uniformity can be a fraught process. Fascinating. Fascinating. For example, are you hoping to get through a business lunch without embarrassing yourself? Or are you thinking about how fascinating the conversation might be? Fallow. Fallow. Overuse of fertilizers may cause farmers to stop rotating crops or leaving their land fallow. Breed. Breed. Over the years, we've come to think of explorers as a peculiar breed. Feat. Feat. One of the first great intellectual feats of a young child is learning how to talk, closely followed by learning how to count. Fatigue. Fatigue. Apparently, unpredictable noise produces more fatigue than predictable noise, but it takes a while for this fatigue to take its toll on performance. Brilliant. Brilliant. However, there is no question that, as far as Egypt is concerned, it began with one monument to one king designed by one brilliant architect, the step pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara. Fertile. Fertile. This continued for 7,000 years, eventually covering a region of over 22,000 square kilometres, with layers of fertile silt. Federal. Federal. Some years ago, federal money was granted to build a new road. Brochure. Brochure. Brochures on a range of attractions are available, and we also offer a booking service for accommodation and transport. Fragment. Fragment. You might wonder how we can tell whether fossil animals lived on land or in water, especially if only fragments are found. Fibrous. Fibrous. He then tried to use fibrous material such as sawdust, charcoal or paper to stabilise the explosive. Bubble. Bubble. If the shell is even slightly cracked during boiling, the white material bubbles out and sets like a tiny mountain chain over the crack. Galaxy. Galaxy. If other civilizations do survive in our galaxy, their ages will range from 0 to several billion years. Flavour. Flavour. You can better enjoy the full flavour of the local life. Budget. Budget. I think for that kind of distance, a cab would be way beyond my budget. Genre. Genre. Perhaps the first international English language scientific journal, it encouraged a new genre of scientific writing, that of short, focused accounts of particular experiments. Gadget. Gadget. I've been investigating 4 new household gadgets and sorting out the advantages and disadvantages. Bully. Bully. The antis, those opposed to women having the vote, depicting a suffragette as a fierce harridan bullying her poor abused husband. Glow. Glow. Adulthood is the longest stage of a glowworm's life. Grasp. Grasp. So ordinary and routine has this become to us that it takes a determined leap of the imagination to grasp the impact of those first moving images. Burial. Burial. This gum came in a bewildering variety of colours, degree of transparency and hardness, depending on the length and location of burial. Glue. Glue. I've prepared this so that I don't get glue everywhere. Hail. Hail. On publication, the dictionary was immediately hailed in many European countries as a landmark. Burst. Burst. These must be pierced by a fork before cooking to prevent bursting. Govern. Govern. The design of Bakelite objects, everything from earrings to television sets, was governed to a large extent by the technical requirements of the moulding process.
Handful. Handful.
Introducing dung beetles into a pasture is a simple process. Approximately 1,500 beetles are released, a handful at a time, into fresh cowpats in the cow pasture. Calendar. Calendar. Each employee is granted 1 extra day as a personal holiday at the time of hire and at the beginning of each calendar year. Grand. Grand. These grand, impressive tributes to the memory of the Egyptian kings have become linked with the country. Hazard. Hazard. I would also say there's an incredible moral hazard to not do anything at all, she continues. Campaign. Campaign. 21 schools reduced bullying as a result of an anti-bullying campaign. Handout. Handout. Government handouts do more damage than tourism does to traditional patterns of food gathering. Herd. Herd. As they began to settle, grow plants and herd animals, the need for a sophisticated number system became paramount. Canal. Canal. The site itself was bordered to the north by a canal which had once been used by boats bringing in raw materials when the area was used for manufacturing. Harden. Harden. The resin was allowed to cool in shallow trays until it hardened and then broken up and ground into powder. Hockey. Hockey. An interesting finding is that mixed-handed hockey players were significantly more confident than their single-handed counterparts. Capable. Capable. In Europe, only Germany proved industrially capable, while in the new Soviet Union and in Japan, the development of the cinema took place in conditions of commercial isolation. Hemisphere. Hemisphere. We are close to a knowledge of annual summer and winter temperature variations over much of the northern hemisphere going back 600 years. Humanity. Humanity. Anthropology at its broadest is the study of humanity, our physical characteristics as animals and our unique non-biological characteristics that we call culture. Capacity. Capacity. Hibernating brown bears do not have this capacity and must therefore resort to major bone reformation in the following spring. Hospitality. Hospitality. In addition, or maybe as a result, high employee turnover has become a recurring problem throughout the hospitality industry. Immune. Immune. Lack of sleep, however, can compromise the immune system, muddle thinking, cause depression, promote anxiety, and encourage irritability. Capture. Capture. The goal they shared was an attempt to capture or mimic human abilities using machines. Humpback. Humpback. Notable exceptions are the heady song-like choruses of bowhead whales in summer and the complex haunting utterances of the humpback whales. Impress. Impress. Travelling around Thailand in the 1990s, William Jansen was impressed with the basic rooftop solar heating systems that were on many homes. Cargo. Cargo. The ideal detector is also fearless enough to deal with jam-packed airport crowds and the roaring engine rooms of cargo ships. Identification. Identification. For added security, a card user may choose to allocate a PIN or personal identification number to their prepaid services card. Inadequate. Inadequate. Newman believes the study demonstrates that the auto-dependent city model is inefficient and grossly inadequate in economic as well as environmental terms. Carve. Carve. The area has been famous for centuries for making beautiful carpets, although recently there has been a trend to move into weaving blankets and wood carving. Imagery. Imagery. American imagery, the cars, the cities, the cowboys, became the primary imagery of film. Inferior. Inferior. Despite our progress, half of the world's population still suffers with water services inferior to those available to the ancient Greeks and Romans. Cast. Cast. Justin Kruger's findings cast doubt on Paul Bloom's theory about people's prejudice towards computer art. Immense. Immense. The scope of the problem facing the world's cities is immense. Inhibit. Inhibit. Authority doesn't have to inhibit innovation, but it often does. Casual. Casual. On these days, business casual clothing is allowed. Impair. Impair. But significantly, their performance was impaired as soon as they were put into the cold water, before their bodies had time to cool down. Inquiry. Inquiry. Hypotheses provide the initiative and incentive for the inquiry and influence the method. Categorize. Categorize. There are plenty of opportunities for new technologies to help filter and categorize information. Classic AI problems. Inevitable. inevitable. The loss of linguistic diversity is inevitable. Insulate, insulate. Not only will roofs need insulating, the interior walls will be required to be double brick. Cater, cater. Does it cater for special diets? Informative, informative. The search has been informative. Intricately, intricately. Such enduring and intricately meshed levels of technical achievement outstrip by far anything achieved by our distant ancestors. Celebration, celebration. The fact that Johnson had taken on the academies of Europe and matched them was cause for much English celebration. Inspection, inspection. But a closer inspection reveals the interpretation as too simplistic. Intuition, intuition. Often, when studying their mother tongue, linguists act as their own informants, judging the ambiguity of other properties of utterances against their own intuitions. Cereal, cereal. Two main cereal crops were introduced to Ireland during this time. Instinct, instinct. One's first inclination might be to argue that there must be some sort of built-in animal aggression instinct that was activated by the experiment. Invader, invader. Archaeological traces of far more elaborate cultures have been dismissed as the ruins of invaders from outside the region. Character, character. It has impressive special effects and a strong believable cast of characters who travel to the 23rd century. Intact, intact. And lastly, please don't even move rocks or branches to take photographs. You should leave the site intact. Investigator, investigator. Investigators who argue otherwise have unwittingly projected the present onto the past. Charity, charity. This is where people promise to donate money to the charity if you achieve your goal. Intention, intention. I'm afraid the intention is to phase these out eventually. Isolation, isolation. In 1911, she was awarded the Nobel Prize for Chemistry for the isolation of a pure form of radium. Chase, chase. These dances, he concluded, told the bees simply that, within quite short distances of the hive, there was a food source worth chasing. Intersection, intersection. The intersections of these streets with Main Street will not be affected. Itinerary, itinerary. I will be distributing leaflets at the end where you can find out more information, but just for the moment I'll outline the itinerary, the main high points of the holiday. Chronic, chronic. But the major worry about noisy environments is that living day after day with chronic noise may produce serious, lasting effects. Kit, kit. Small loans are provided initially for purchasing fixed assets such as bicycles, shoe shine kits and basic building materials for a market stall. Justice, justice. The environmental practices of big businesses are shaped by a fundamental fact that for many of us offends our sense of justice. Circumstance, circumstance. Others, however, argue that the circumstances of an individual crime and the motivation for committing it should always be taken into account when deciding on the punishment. License, license. Only your birth certificate, driving licence, passport or medical card will be acceptable. Landlord. Landlord. It was the availability rather than the condition of the housing that was the major concern for tenants and landlords alike. Circuit. Circuit. That circuit evolved from a very simple mechanism for decoding basic information to the present highly elaborated reading brain. Limitation. Limitation. Yet it shares with engineering the aim of designing patterns of movement within limitations of space. Leak. Leak. One way to cut back on water consumption is simply to prevent leaks. Circus. Circus. In spite of this, Circus Romano isn't at all like the traditional circuses I grew up with. Lobby. Lobby. That would matter less if people applied the same degree of scepticism to environmental lobbying as they do to lobby groups in other fields. Leap. Leap. Viewed from this angle, humour is just a form of creative insight, a sudden leap to a new perspective. Sight. Sight. Which of the responses is cited as unexpectedly uncommon, given the amount of time spent on the issue by the newspapers and television? Logo. Logo. Rarely do patients watch a doctor write with a pen that isn't emblazoned with a drug's name, or see a nurse use a tablet not bearing a pharmaceutical company's logo. Lifespan. Lifespan. Castles, palaces and cathedrals have a longer lifespan than the dwellings of ordinary people. Civil. Civil. Apparently they were used by the ancient Chinese for picking out clerks and civil servants. Loose. Loose. It was a very loose adaptation, using the same situation and story, but moving it to 16th century Japan instead of 16th century Britain. Likelihood. Likelihood. Raff's team went on to calculate the likelihood of it happening. Click. Click. You can start with the online tutorial NetStart. Just click on the NetStart icon on the main menu. Marvellous. Marvellous. I don't think I've really said enough about the marvellous area you'll be walking in. Litter. Litter. After running from rips or tears in the bark of trees, the sap hardens to form lumps of gum which eventually fall to the ground and are buried under layers of forest litter. Clue. Clue. The Lapita left precious few clues about themselves, but Efate expands the volume of data available to researchers dramatically. Metropolitan. Metropolitan. Only the Sydney metropolitan beaches were meshed. Log. Log. The destruction of the rainforests is the direct result of logging activity. Coconut. Coconut. Once out there, skilled seafarers would have detected abundant leads to follow to land. Seabirds, coconuts and twigs carried out to sea by the tides. Mitigate. Mitigate. Many of her students said that, faced with a risky situation, they first tried to calm themselves down, then looked for a way to mitigate the danger. Lounge. Lounge. Rent is £64 per week, including bills, not telephone. Broadband internet connections and telephones, with communal kitchen, dining and lounge areas. Code. Code. Researchers have also found that different types of laughter serve as codes to complex human social hierarchies. Colleague. Williams and his colleagues sampled the blood of over 5,000 American Indians in Western North America during a 20-year period. Norm. Norm. The critical question now is whether this can become the norm rather than the exception. Magical. Magical. The firefly's almost magical light has attracted human attention for generations. Column. Column. The idea was that as one end of the column rose, the base would roll across the ground on a trolley. Nourish. Nourish. The children of the newly literate mothers were also better nourished than those of women who could not read. Malaria. Malaria. There were improvements in agriculture that wiped out malaria, but these were small gains. Commission. Commission. Another body, the Australian Sports Commission, ASC, finances programs of excellence in a total of 96 sports for thousands of sportsmen and women. Obligation. Obligation. According to Cynthia Puri, a psychologist at Clemson University, Pedelios' story proves the point that courage is not motivated by fearlessness, but by moral obligation. Manipulate. Manipulate. Some employees can feel manipulated when asked to participate in goal setting. Commodity. Commodity. But in agricultural and domestic sectors, the price of water is opt. Opt. Yes, a lot of students opt for that. Menace. Menace. Wildfires are becoming an increasing menace in the western United States, with Southern California being the hardest hit area. Community. Community. Only basic instincts are carried in the genes of a newborn baby. Other skills being learned from others in the community as the child grows up. Originate. Originate. Some large species originating from France excavate tunnels to a depth of approximately 30 centimetres below the dung pat. Merchandising. Merchandising. But the paper and merchandising activities alone did not provide sufficient funds for the WSPU to meet organisational costs. Compensate. Compensate. It could compensate for the shortage of inland sites for energy production. overhead, overhead. Of course, those nearest the highway will be the worst hit, with heavy traffic noise as well as the noise from the light planes overhead. Meteorological, meteorological. The information is transferred direct to onshore meteorological stations. Complex, complex. The fault stores in the trench were incorporated into the complex to discourage unwanted visitors. Overlap, overlap. Here the methods of archaeology and ethnography overlap. Mimic, mimic. The goal they shared was an attempt to capture or mimic human abilities using machines. Complicated. Component, component. He argues that tooth crowns and roots have a high genetic component, minimally affected by environmental and other factors. Passport, passport. We can't issue your card unless you bring all three, so don't forget your union card, passport photo and fee. Monoculture, monoculture. The spread of monoculture and the use of high-yielding varieties of crops have been accompanied by the disappearance of old varieties of food plants. Can lead to a rise in levels of stress due to physical changes in the body affecting the composition of the blood. Pat, pat. South African beetles dig narrow tunnels of approximately 20 centimetres below the surface of the pat. Mundane, mundane. Such objects can include both the extraordinary and the mundane, the beautiful and the banal. Compound, compound. Soil imbalances such as acidification should be treated with compounds of nitrogen and sulphur. Patent, patent. Modern-day plastic preparation is based on the same principles as that patented in 1907. Municipal, municipal. There are other examples in cities such as St. Petersburg, Florida, where all municipal water is recycled back into domestic systems. Comprise, comprise. This experiment involved an organisation comprising 4 divisions. Persuade, persuade. I've never done anything with a group before, and we had to find ways of cooperating and compromising and sometimes persuading people. Neighbourhood, neighbourhood. They wanted to be in a more attractive neighbourhood. Concentrate, concentrate. The second resolution concentrates on the need to preserve the genetic diversity of European forests. Pitched, pitched. Basically, this is where you whistle and the key holder gives off a high-pitched noise and flashes light so you can find it. Nerve, nerve. Similarly, although at least some cetaceans have taste buds, the nerves serving these have degenerated or are rudimentary. Conflict, conflict. The writer mentions London's National Gallery to illustrate the conflict that may arise in society between financial and artistic values. Plantation, plantation. An agricultural worker digging the grounds of a derelict plantation scraped open a grave, the first of dozens in a burial ground some 3,000 years old. Notable, notable. Macfarlane's case has been strengthened by support from notable quarters. Confusion, confusion. Early cinema audiences often experience the same confusion. Plot, plot. Mangan's group asked subjects questions about a short story whose plot had universal student appeal. Offspring, offspring. The former are slow to recover from the winter cold and produce only 1 or 2 generations of offspring from late spring until autumn. Congestion, congestion. However, public infrastructure did not keep pace with urban sprawl, causing massive congestion problems which now make commuting times far higher. Prefrontal, prefrontal. His scan showed that, at the beginning of a joke, the listener's prefrontal cortex lit up, particularly the right prefrontal, believed to be critical for problem solving. Olympic, Olympic. At the Atlanta Olympic Games in 1996, these sliced as much as 2% off cyclists and rowers' time. Consistent, consistent. Consistent with maximising the impact of rewards, managers should look for ways to increase their visibility. Prehistoric, prehistoric. Graphic artists have worked with researchers. Operational, operational. If it is not clear, through role signs of one sort or another, which role is currently the operational one, the other party may not react in the appropriate way. Constant, constant. All warm-blooded animals make constant tiny adjustments in arousal in response to external events. Preservation, preservation. However, preservation can bring a language back from the dead. Opposition, opposition. The women's exhibition in 1909 met with great opposition from Parliament. Consult, consult. They combine the evidence of visual landmarks with a mental library of local directions, all within a framework which is consulted and updated. Proceed, proceed. Successful completion and the achievement of an A or B result in some courses will enable students to achieve advanced standing in these subjects if they proceed to university study. Optical, optical. Float plants today make glass of near optical quality. Contaminated, contaminated. How much will you receive for an open jar of contaminated chicken curry? Profound, profound. Once a location is established as a main tourist destination, the effects on the local community are profound. Orbit, orbit. The patch of brain tucked behind the orbits of the eyes is associated with evaluating information. Contemporary, contemporary. But today, I want to begin looking at some contemporary experimental designs for housing. Prolong, prolong. In government laboratories and elsewhere, scientists are seeking a drug able to prolong life and youthful vigour. Outlay, outlay. And the results of knitting your own clothes can be very rewarding, even though the skills you need to get going are really quite basic and the financial outlay is minimal. Conserve, conserve. Another way of conserving water resources involves better management of the environment generally. Punishment. Punishment. One list of the roles of a manager identified the following: executive, planner, policymaker, expert, controller of rewards and punishments, counsellor, friend, teacher. Overweight. Overweight. Another problem is being overweight. Content. Content. Nobody knows the Arctic as well as the locals, which is why they are not content simply to stand back and let outside experts tell them what's happening. Recruit. Recruit. You are among the 200 extra staff recruited to help look after them. Overwhelming. Overwhelming. The overwhelming consensus was that virtually all the teacher subjects would refuse to obey the experimenter. Continuous. Continuous. The preoccupation in Western society with crime and with lawlessness is part of a long and continuous tradition. Refund. Refund. We're unable to exchange tickets or refund money unless a performance is cancelled due to unforeseen circumstances. Oh. Nevertheless, the modern-day space programs owe their success to the humble beginnings of those in previous centuries. Contract. Contract. The contract with them put him in a very strong position. Relevance. Relevance. Of particular relevance to students who wish to improve their organisational skills and who feel that their final product is never clear enough. Ownership. Ownership. This involved scrapping formal job titles and giving staff huge amounts of ownership over their own time and projects. Contrast. Contrast. Yes, in the standard service, each photo is checked and we can sometimes touch up the colour a bit or improve the contrast. Relief. Relief. Those surveyed had experienced chronic illnesses for which orthodox medicine had been able to provide little relief. Pace. Pace. Never before has the planet's linguistic diversity shrunk at such a pace. Contribution. Contribution. Coal's total contribution to greenhouse gas emissions is thought to be about reluctant. Reluctant. For the better part of a century, most biologists have been reluctant to use those words, mindful of a principle of evolution that says evolution cannot run backwards. Parallel. Parallel. The study covered 500 clerical employees in 4 parallel divisions. Convey. Convey. It also conveys a sense of the energy and ability the suffragettes brought to their fight for freedom and equality. Renewed. Renewed. The 14th to 16th century is sometimes called the revival of learning, a time of renewed interest in the lost knowledge of classical times. Password. Password. Yes, your tutor will need to arrange with the technical support team for you to get a password, so ask him or her about it when you start the course. Convince. Convince. Almost unbelievably, it is a mere 100 years since that train arrived and the audience screamed and fled, convinced by the dangerous reality of what they saw. Reproduce. Reproduce. It will be free to concentrate all its efforts on the task of finding a mate and reproducing. Plausible. plausible. The problem for biologists, psychologists and anthropologists is to sort out which of these two polar explanations is more plausible. Core. Core. This is a question at the very core of humanity. Rigorous. Rigorous. Once you have arrived at your hypothesis, which is a product of your imagination, you then proceed to a strictly logical and rigorous process. Pliable. Pliable. Unlike bone, this firm, pliable material is rather like your nose. Corporate. Corporate. Some banks have yet to introduce a full corporate look. Police forces are researching a complete new look for the 21st century. Ritual. Ritual. Alternatively, the carving may have been carried out during a Bronze or Iron Age ritual. Portable. Portable. As this is a travelling circus, it follows a long tradition by performing in a marquee, which is really like a canvas portable building. Corporation. Corporation. Trust in the corporation has been eroded. Routine. Routine. What would you like to change in your daily routine? Possession. Possession. It was unclear who actually owned the land, and this wasn't settled until 20 years later when the council took possession of it. Corpus. Corpus. A representative sample of language, compiled for the purpose of linguistic analysis, is known as a corpus. Sale. Sale. A livestock would have limited the distance the farmers could sail. Postage. Postage. A philatelist collects postage stamps. Corridor. Corridor. Now, to get to the main hall, you walk on to the end of this corridor in front of you, and then you turn left. Salespeople. Salespeople. With the huge investment the industry had placed in face-to-face selling, salespeople have essentially become specialists in one drug or group of drugs. Postcode. Postcode. And do you know your postcode? Council. Council. Recognizing the potential benefits of being identified as environmentally responsible, Fisher has approached the council requesting to undergo the certification process. Scarce. Scarce. Economic opportunities are scarce, and for many people, state benefits are their only income. Posture. Posture. Though absolutely flat shoes can be a solution for some, others find their posture suffers. Counter. Counter. Many experts believe that the best way to counter this trend is to impose water charges based on the real cost of supplies. Scholar. Scholar. There is no agreement among scholars and archaeologists on why the vessels were placed in the tomb of Djoser. Poverty. Poverty. The table below shows the proportion of different categories of families living in poverty in Australia in 1999. Counterpart. Counterpart. They are often wealthier than their American counterparts, but have not generated the same level of car use. Semantic. Semantic. So even if a punchline sounds silly, the listener can see there is a clever semantic fit. Pride. Pride. At the same time, there were street children who take pride in supporting themselves and their families and who often enjoy their work. Couple. Couple. These prices, coupled with the increasing demand, spurred the search for new routes to Asia by Europeans eager to take part in the spice trade. Serial. Serial. Early cinema programs were a mixture of items combining comic sketches, freestanding narratives, serial episodes, and promotional. Promotional. When organisations are expanding and adding personnel, promotional opportunities, pay rises, and crack. Crack. When they became liquid, they move more quickly through cracks in the surface. Shatter. Shatter. And if they are within the central tensile region of the pane, the stresses this unleashes can shatter the whole sheet. Realism. Realism. One effect of this realism was to educate the world about itself. Creature. Creature. But the daytime economy is already heavily exploited by other creatures, such as birds. Shelf. Shelf. The articles do not need to be returned to the shelves. Refine. Refine. Listening to what they think about, something may well help you develop or refine your own thoughts. Crew. Crew. This was an explosion of a large oil tanker, which caused the loss of more than 50 lives of the crew. Silt. Silt. This continued for 7,000 years, eventually covering a region of over 22,000 square kilometres with layers of fertile silt. Reliance. Reliance. The increasing self-reliance of many elderly people is probably linked to a massive increase in the use of simple home medical aids. Cruise. Cruise. How about taking your family for a cruise? Soar. Soar. Food production has kept pace with soaring populations, mainly because of the expansion of artificial irrigation systems. Repertoire. Repertoire. Large whales primarily use the lower frequencies and are often limited in their repertoire. Cultivate. Cultivate.
They therefore cultivate these fungi in their nests, bringing them leaves to feed on, and then use them as a source of food.
Split. Split. It's almost 100,000 years since the Asiatic lions split off and developed as a subspecies. Replenish. Replenish.
The latest beliefs are that the main purposes of sleep are to enable the body to rest and replenish.
Cure. Cure. Cinnamon was also reported to have health benefits and was thought to cure various ailments such as indigestion. Squash. Squash. AIS scientists work across a number of sports, applying skills learned in one, such as building muscle strength in golfers, to others, such as swimming and squash. Resist. Resist. They resist goals which are imposed. Curriculum. Curriculum. The curriculum then becomes peripheral and is dealt with by the reserve capacity of the brain. Squeeze. Squeeze. The focus is on individuals tweaking performances to squeeze an extra 100th of a second here and an extra millimetre there. Respectively. Respectively. But other pairs revealed less agreement. 79% matched fast to slow and weak to strong, respectively. Curve. Curve. To show this motion, she traced a curve inside the circle. Stack. Stack. Local sandstone, the tiles on the roofs and the bricks of the chimney stack were baked from local clay. Retail. Retail. It actually opened as a retail chain selling camping equipment. Damp, damp. Although glowworms are found wherever conditions are damp, food is in good supply, and there is an overhanging wall, they are most spectacular in caves. Stomach, stomach. In each human, there are microbes that live only in the stomach, the mouth, or the armpit, and by and large, they do so peacefully. Rhythm, rhythm. It doesn't matter whether you're an experienced musician or a complete beginner, you'll be creating complex rhythms in no time. Debate, debate. This has ignited public debate about artificial intelligence, but the term is also being used once more within the computer industry. Straightforward, straightforward. One is straightforward. On many trees, the leaves that are the reddest are those on the side of the tree which gets most sun. Rome, Rome. If we go back 10,000 years, we would find that there were lions roaming. Decorate, decorate. As many as 500 sculptures decorate the monument. Strain, strain. With domestic and agricultural demands also increasing, the capacity of water supply systems is under growing strain. Robust, robust. We would have to make the turbines robust because the sea is a hostile environment. Deduce, deduce. If the predictions you make as a result of deducing certain consequences from your hypothesis are not shown to be correct, then you discard or modify your hypothesis. Sudden, sudden. He says that while there is no single format for jokes, many revolve around a sudden and surprising conceptual shift. Scan, scan. Simple eye exercises to help you skim and scan. Degradation, degradation. In both mountains and deserts, slow-growing trees are often the main sources of fuel, and water supplies may be limited or vulnerable to degradation through heavy use. Sufferer, sufferer. Many sufferers don't know the cause or the solution. Scare, scare. Holes in nets scare sharks. Delivery, delivery. The charge for special next-day delivery in Australia is $7. Surge, surge. Sometimes the magma moves very swiftly indeed. It does not have time to cool as it surges upwards. Scatter, scatter. Fish and dolphins that live in extremely muddy water cannot see because the light is obstructed and scattered by the dirt in the water. Depart, depart. Trains for London depart every half hour during the week. Sustain, sustain. Amazonia could not and cannot sustain a more complex society. Scent, scent. The scent she carried in her samples and on her body was a message to the other bees that this particular food was the one they were looking for. Depict, depict. Because the tropical forest has been depicted as ecologically unfit for large-scale human occupation, some environmentalists have opposed development of any kind. Symptom, symptom. They may request brief details of your symptoms or illness. This enables the doctors to assess the degree of urgency. Scope, scope. The scope of the problem facing the world's cities is immense. Deposit, deposit. We require you to raise sponsorship money of at least $3,200, paying $250 of it up front as a deposit and the rest in stages throughout the year. Tackle. Tackle. Process may take the place of discussion and be at the expense of real collaboration so that boxes are ticked rather than issues tackled. Score. Score. The AIS employs more than 100 sports scientists and doctors and collaborates with scores of others in universities and research centres. Deprive. Deprive. People are not in a position to exercise personal liberty and to be self-determining if they are poverty-stricken or deprived of basic education. Texture. Texture. The skin's covered with barbs, giving it a rough texture like sandpaper. Segment. Segment. All the training is then geared towards making the athlete hit those targets, both overall and for each segment of the race. Depth. Depth. Highest quality gum was hard and bright and was usually found at shallow depth on the hills. Topsoil. Topsoil. Topsoil in India and China is vanishing much faster than in America. Sensible. Sensible. So, whether they were actually used to build the pyramids or not, it seems that kites may make sensible construction tools in the 21st century. Derive. Derive. For his astonishing achievements, he was awarded the Nobel Prize, and it is from his work that most of today's knowledge of what bees say to each other derives. Trance. Trance. Lozanoff experimented with teaching by direct suggestion during sleep, hypnosis and trance states, but found such procedures unnecessary. Severity. Severity. Beginning at the lowest level and increasing in severity with each successive wrong answer. Descend. Descend. Most researchers conclude that pterosaurs are descended from a small tree-dwelling reptile that spent his life jumping between branches. Transmit. Transmit. After about 300 hours of training, they are generally sufficiently fluent to transmit the language to the next generation. Sheer. Sheer. The explosion in the sheer number of salespeople in the field forces close examination of the pressures, influences and relationships between drug reps and doctors. Desirable. Desirable. An ability to sight read and previous experience in choral singing is desirable, although not essential. Transparent. Transparent. The way rewards are distributed should be transparent so that employees perceive that rewards or outcomes are equitable and equal to the inputs given. Shower. Shower. More important are the deforestation and impacts on water supplies arising from the need to provide tourists with cooked food and hot showers. Despite. Despite. Despite storm damage, Cutty Sark beat Thermopylae back to London. Triple. Triple. As a whole, European countries see forests as performing a triple function: biological, economic and recreational. Simplicity. Simplicity. The reason for the simplicity of the Indian way of life is that Amazonia has always been unable to support a more complex society. Destination. Destination. Trains and cars initially allowed people to live at greater distances without taking longer to reach their destination. Tune. Older cars were the worst offenders, though a sizable number of quite new cars were also identified as gross polluters. They were simply badly tuned. Skim. When the reading brain skims like this, it reduces time allocated to deep reading processes. Detrimental. The detrimental effects of noise in classroom situations are not limited to children experiencing disability. Ultimate. Volcanoes are the ultimate earth-moving machinery. Sledge. Supplies were brought to us on large sledges from a ship 15 kilometres away at the ice edge. Digital. It collects images from digital cameras running at 50 frames a second. Unbiased. A corpus enables the linguist to make unbiased statements about frequency of usage, and it provides accessible data for the use of different researchers. Slope. Plumb lines were also used to measure the depth of the shaft and to determine the slope of the tunnel. Dimension. He spent the afternoon at the ruins, noting down the dimensions of some of the buildings. Undergo. Recognizing the potential benefits of being identified as environmentally responsible, fisheries approached the council requesting to undergo the certification process. Smooth. Sharp corners proved impractical and were thus avoided, giving rise to the smooth, streamlined style popular in the 1930s. Diminish. The amount of open space in California has diminished over the last 10 years. Undermine. Because it can seriously undermine the functioning of the immune system, sufferers are vulnerable to infection. Solidify. When the interior finally solidifies and shrinks, it exerts a pull on the outer layer. Diploma. And how many of these modules would I have to do to get the diploma? Unprecedented. This unprecedented effort was made possible by the owners of the 67-metre yacht, White Cloud. Specify. It would be a good idea to specify the role definitions of soldiers more clearly. Disabled. That represents a significant drop in the number of disabled old people in the population. Update. They combine the evidence of visual landmarks with a mental library of local directions, all within a framework which is consulted and updated. Sphere. Is it about an issue that falls within the sphere of responsibility, or should it just be forwarded to someone else? Disappointing. Despite substantial funding, results have been disappointing. Utilize. So now, I guess the two main things to remember here are to identify individual talent and then to utilize it. Spontaneous. The displays of art museums serve as a warning of what critical practices can emerge when spontaneous criticism is suppressed. Disaster. Disaster. Between 1940 and 1959, overfishing led to crashes in salmon populations so severe that in 1953, Alaska was declared a federal disaster area. Viable. Viable. There is a widespread belief that increasing wealth encourages people to live farther out where cars are the only viable transport. Spouse. Spouse. The risk of lung cancer also increases over the years of exposure, and the figure jumps to 80% if the spouse has been smoking 4 packs a day for 20 years. Discard. Discard. So rather than maintaining the now redundant leaves throughout the winter, the tree saves its precious resources and discards them. Vigilance. Vigilance. Vigilance tests help improve concentration. Stabilize. Stabilize. He then tried to use fibrous material such as sawdust, charcoal or paper to stabilize the explosive. Discipline. Discipline. Anthropology is thus a broad discipline. It is generally broken down into 3 smaller disciplines: physical anthropology, cultural anthropology, and archaeology. Violence. Violence. And disputes over shared water resources have led to violence and continue to raise local, national, and even international tensions. Starve. Starve. Thousands starved as the harvests failed after snow in June and frosts in August. Dissertation. Dissertation. Hello, Sandy. How have you been getting on with your dissertation? Weave. Weave. The area has been famous for centuries for making beautiful carpets, although recently there has been a trend to move into weaving blankets and wood carving. Striking. Striking. The investigators' findings were striking. Distinct. Distinct. Episodic memory is distinct from another type of memory called semantic memory. Wreck. Wreck. This climatic phenomenon was accused of wrecking tourism, causing allergies, melting the ski slopes and causing 22 deaths. Substitute. Substitute. But curriculum work alone may only have short-term effects. It should be an addition to policy work, not a substitute. Distinguish. Distinguish. Certainly, it distinguished them from their ancestors, but what gave them the courage to launch out on such risky voyages? Yacht. Yacht. You could become an experienced yacht skipper or instructor, and many people go on to spend their future holidays being paid to enjoy their favourite sport. Suffrage. Suffrage.
The WSPU began an educated campaign to put women's suffrage on the political agenda.
Distract. Distract. This suggests that the low temperature did not slow down mental functioning directly, but the feeling of cold distracted the divers from their tasks. Install. Install. We've installed air conditioning so it won't get so hot. Superior. Superior. Would the human race face the culture shock it faced with a superior and much older civilization? Distribute. Distribute. They also distributed leaflets describing the dangers of cars, and inviting people to use the white bikes. Instantly. Instantly. Goods, once they have been made, are assumed to move instantly and at no cost from place to place. Supplier. Supplier. Such measures are helping coal to maintain its status as a major supplier of the world's energy needs. Diverse. Diverse. These diverse discoveries, which have made our everyday living more convenient, were discovered partly by chance. Institute. Institute. We are fantastically lucky to have received partial research funding for this trip from our institute, so I shall expect 200% attention and participation from you all. Surname. Surname. It's Anne, and her surname is spelt R-E-A. Division. Division. Each division was organised in exactly the same way, used the same technology, did exactly the same kind of work, and had employees of comparable aptitudes. Insufficient. Insufficient. Similarly, it may help to discuss a topic with other people, especially if you feel that you have insufficient ideas or too many disorganised ideas. Suspense. Suspense. It is a first-class suspense adventure which also looks at the human condition. Documentary. Documentary. This programme is a documentary about technological developments. Insurance. Insurance. If you haven't organised an annual insurance policy of your own, you'll need to take out the low-cost cover we offer. Systematic. Systematic. Systematic meshing was extended to include the beaches to the south of Sydney. Donate. Donate. If you'd like some more information about where to donate an old bicycle or offer help in other ways, please contact us. Integrate. Integrate. This objective has to be achieved by integrating environmental considerations into community policies. Toxin. Toxin. Bitterness, he says, alerts us of toxins in the food, while sourness warns us of spoilage and saltiness signals the presence of minerals. Draft. Draft. When you've got something together, the trainer here will look through the draft version for you to see if it's okay. Intelligent. Intelligent. He said he and Crick had succeeded because they were aware that they weren't the most intelligent of the scientists pursuing the answer. Transcend. Transcend. This means that a forest policy is vital, that it must transcend national frontiers and generations of people. Dramatic. Dramatic. In the endurance events, the results have been more dramatic. Intense. Intense. Other researchers have found that play in cats, rats and mice is at its most intense just as this window of opportunity reaches its peak. Traverse. Traverse. Travel has existed since the beginning of time, when primitive man set out, often traversing great distances in search of game. Drawback. Drawback. Another drawback I remember it mentioned was that questionnaire data tends not to reveal anything unexpected. Interact. Interact. Transformational leaders, when interacting with their followers, focus on their development. Treadmill. Treadmill. Such waste puts farmers on a chemical treadmill. Bugs and weeds become reactant to poisons, so next year's poisons must be more lethal. Drought. Drought. That sounds a bit like science fiction, especially when now we can't even tell them when a drought will break. Interior. Interior. They had a wider hull, double planking and a solid interior for added stability. Unravel. Unravel. New research is now unravelling the ways in which bacteria aid digestion, regulate our immune systems, affect our behaviour and even combat obesity. Due. Due. Feeding increasing populations is possible due primarily to improved irrigation systems. Internal. Internal. Originally an air ambulance, the yacht's helicopter has a rear double door and a large internal space that's well suited for cargo. Utterance. Utterance. Informants are native speakers of a language who provide utterances for analysis and other kinds of information about the language. Dynamic. Dynamic. But ecosystems are not merely collections of species, they are also the dynamic and ever-shifting relationships between them. Interval. Interval. Plyometric exercises help athletes make the best use of this brief interval. Vacuum. Vacuum. The original patent outlined a three-stage process in which phenol and formaldehyde were initially combined under vacuum inside a large egg-shaped kettle. Ease. Ease. Think of the relative ease with which young children, but not infants or adults, absorb language. Joint. Joint. The Americans and Australians have cooperated on joint research projects. Vicinity. Vicinity. Three other types of airspace, classes D, C and B, govern the vicinity of airports. Echo. Echo. Echolocation. The perception of objects by means of sound wave echoes. Judgment. Judgment. Historical records make statements, offer opinions and pass judgments. Vicious. Vicious. But of course that starts up a vicious circle. Ecology. Ecology. The beetles soon became a permanent self-sustaining part of the local ecology. Junction. Junction. A keep clear sign will be erected at the junction. Virtue. Virtue. The virtue of job descriptions is that they lessen this role ambiguity. Economic. Economic. The economic importance of forests has been understood since the dawn of man. Wood was the first fuel. Juvenile. Juvenile. A popular explanation of play has been that it helps juveniles develop the skills they will need to hunt, mate and socialise as adults. Vivid. Vivid. In the face of the frequent and often vivid media coverage, it is likely that children will have formed ideas about rainforests. Ecosystem. Ecosystem. The assumption that the tropical ecosystem of Amazonia has been created solely by natural forces has led to some fruitful discoveries. Keen. Keen. By comparison, the bottlenose dolphin has extremely keen vision in water. Voucher, voucher. Gift vouchers for any value can be bought at the box office. Efficient, efficient. It was uncommon to find means of transport that were more efficient than walking, but less technologically advanced than motor vehicles. Label, label. And we need to label them. We can use different coloured labels. Wander, wander. I suggest you spend a good hour wandering around this lovely building. Electronic, electronic. Explain why you find this piece of electronic equipment useful. Landmark, landmark. On publication, the dictionary was immediately hailed in many European countries as a landmark. Wise, wise. Many researchers now think that these were pictures the wise men engraved of themselves. Element, element. Students complete units in picture composition and photographic processing alongside elements of graphic design. Landscape, landscape. Tourists are drawn to these regions by their natural landscape beauty and the unique cultures of their indigenous people. Eliminate, eliminate. If the individual knows that he or she can control the noise, this seems to eliminate both its negative effects at the time and its after effects. Launch, launch. In 1999, Tourism New Zealand launched a campaign to communicate a new brand position to the world. Yoga, yoga. We're currently running a range of yoga. Embark, embark. My advice would be to get it done before you embark upon the research. Layer, layer. After running from rips or tears in the bark of trees, the sap hardens to form the lumps of gum which eventually fall to the ground and are buried under layers of forest litter. Youngster, youngster. At the Australian Institute of Sport, AIS, hundreds of youngsters and pros live and train under the eyes of coaches. Emotion, emotion. It is more difficult to measure some emotions than others. Layout, layout. Obviously, the noise factor will have to be taken into consideration with the layout of the houses. Abrupt, abrupt. These abrupt changes will produce either positive or negative feelings. Emphasize, emphasize. Embarrassing AI failures receive a disproportionate amount of media attention, emphasizing the message that we cannot rely on technology. Leaflet, leaflet. This leaflet will be very helpful, but I can tell you some of the main things. Abuse, abuse. However, it is also a place where some children are exposed with little or no protection to exploitative employment, urban crime and abuse. Empire, empire. During the empire, Rome was a huge city by ancient standards of about 1 million inhabitants. Liquid, liquid. As they do so, the pressure drops and they expand and become liquid and rise more swiftly. Acute, acute. They have a very acute sense of smell. Encode, encode. A bee's brain is the size of a grass seed, yet in this tiny brain, are encoded some of the most complex and amazing behavioural patterns witnessed outside humankind. Load. Load. We've introduced new restrictions on loading and unloading for the supermarket. Adept. Adept. Yet others go into mathematical procedures but assume that the reader is adept in using algebra. Thousand in total, and in their rapid migration eastward, they encountered hundreds of islands. Maintain. Maintain. In the future, governments should maintain ownership of water infrastructures. Admire. Admire. Describe a well-known person you like or admire and explain why you admire this person. Endanger. Endanger. The widespread use of pesticides and fertilizers may also have endangered the glowworm. Marine. Marine. As a marine biologist, my own research was fascinating, but it's perhaps climate change research that is the most crucial field of study. Admit. Admit. The mainstream doctors began to admit they could learn from the personal style of alternative therapists. Engage. Engage. Fortunately, several members of the Royal Society possessed an interest in language and became engaged in various linguistic projects. Master. Master. Japanese master builders of 1,000 years ago anticipated concepts of modern structural engineering. Aerial. Aerial. For my money, it's the aerial displays which are outstanding, as well as the magical tricks. Enhance. Enhance. Today, I'm going to explore why it is so popular in these cuisines, and more importantly, how does it enhance the flavour of food? Memorise. Memorise. Some people think that education should be about memorising the important ideas of the past. Aesthetic. Aesthetic. The early Greeks bathed for aesthetic reasons and apparently didn't use soap. Enterprise. Enterprise. Participants in this enterprise were supplied with bicycles which they used to deliver parcels and messages, and which they were required to pay for gradually from their wages. Migrate. Migrate. The discussion of Williams's research indicates the periods at which early people are thought to have migrated along certain routes. Agenda. Agenda. Agendas can become overloaded. Entertainment. Entertainment. The Union also arranges and supports entertainments, sporting activities and trips. Millennium. Millennium. At the outset of the new millennium, however, the way resource planners think about water is beginning to change. Aggression. Aggression. They use behaviour from a lot of different contexts. Predation, aggression, reproduction, he says. Entitle. Entitle. All students at the college are entitled to become members of the sports centre. Mineral. Mineral. Bitterness, he says, alerts us of toxins in the food, while sourness warns us of spoilage, and saltiness signals the presence of minerals. Allocation. Allocation. It is best to make a weekly allocation of your time, making sure that you have enough left for recreational activities. Equip. Equip. English was not well equipped to deal with scientific argument. minimize, minimize. We deliberately keep the party small in size to minimize disruption to people and landscape. Ambulance, ambulance. The asynchronous ambulance siren underscores the psychic injury incurred in the argument. Equivalent, equivalent. For maximum benefit, people would probably have to reduce their caloric intake by roughly 30%, equivalent to dropping from 2,500 calories a day to 1,750. Modify, modify. You can always modify that sentence later if you need to. Ample, ample. There is ample space for quiet independent study, and there are also areas for group work. Erode, erode. The high standard of professionals, including doctors, has been eroded as a consequence. Module, module. And each module lasts for one term, about 12 weeks at a time. Apt, apt. I decided to test whether various lines of motion were apt ways of showing movement, or if they were merely idiosyncratic marks. Essence, essence. Discovered in the early 1800s and named nicotinamide, the oily essence, now called nicotine, is the main active ingredient of tobacco. Monopoly, monopoly. In the late 1600s, the Yemeni monopoly on coffee production broke down. Establishment, establishment. The course reflects how far some alternative therapies have come in their struggle for acceptance by the medical establishment. Monument, monument. Clemens found a strange hieroglyph on the wall of an Egyptian monument. Ascertain, ascertain. Once the quality and skill of the individual or company have been ascertained, they had to pass an economic test. Estate, estate. This is the best part of the estate. Moral, moral. Kim Schaefer's marketing technique may be open to criticism on moral grounds. Assert, assert. If we applied the Russian training model to some of the outstanding runners we have in this country, yes, it asserts, they would be breaking records left and right. Evaluate, evaluate. The patch of brain tucked behind the orbits of the eyes is associated with evaluating information. Mortality, mortality. The women who have learnt to read through the National Literacy Crusade had the lowest rates of child mortality. Asset, asset. Small loans are provided initially for purchasing fixed assets such as bicycles, shoeshine kits and basic building materials for a market stall. Eventually, eventually. I agree that this concept is still a long way in the future, but it will come eventually and the float data will have made a contribution. Motivation, motivation. This was the initial motivation, one now shared by all 31 participants representing 31 European countries. Assure, assure. The small class assures maximum attention for each student. Excavate, excavate. This was because the mountain could be excavated not only from the tunnel mouths, but also from shafts. Mould, mould. When the personnel department is choosing between applicants, they need to look for someone who's broken the mould and can think for themselves. Astonishing. Astonishing. For his astonishing achievements, he was awarded the Nobel Prize. Exceed. Exceed. As microwave cooking times are much shorter than other cooking times, it is essential that recommended cooking times are not exceeded without first checking the food. Mystery. Mystery. It has always been a mystery how the bridge was built. Autism. Autism. Autism does not allow learning or thinking in the same ways as in children who are developing normally. Exception. Exception. With the exception of applications for Scholarship Category E, all newly enrolled international students are automatically considered for these scholarships. Myth. Myth. Nor do the oral histories and traditions of later Polynesians offer any insights, for they turn into myths long before they reach as far back in time as the Lapita. Aviation. Aviation. Generally, Class E airspace is where one finds general aviation aircraft. Exclude. Exclude. So crimes like theft by employees, things like embezzlement or fraud against one's actual employer, are excluded according to this definition. Neuron. Neuron. Cotman believes this hormone, which keeps neurons functioning, may prevent the brains of active humans from deteriorating. Bacterial. Bacterial. Our obsession with hygiene, our overuse of antibiotics, and our unhealthy, low-fibre diets are disrupting the bacterial balance. Executive. Executive. One list of the roles of a manager identified the following: executive, planner, policymaker, expert, controller of rewards and punishments, counsellor, friend, teacher. Notion. Notion. Collectors might be inspired to study how dolls reflect notions of what children like or ought to like. Ballet. Ballet. The dance studio provides a smaller, more intimate space, which we use for ballet, modern dance and martial arts. Exhaust. Exhaust. Cylindrical in shape, made of wood and hanging from string, it was moved to and fro by steam blowing out from small exhaust ports at either end. Nurture. Nurture. Many people nurture the belief that environmental standards are declining. Bibliography. Bibliography. Your tutors will tell you at the outset how to set out the chapters they require, but you will need to ask them how they would like you to organise the bibliography. Exhibit. Exhibit. It has a beak the size of a man and wings wider than those of many of the planes exhibited nearby. Nutrient. Nutrient. Like grapevines, the trees thrive in poor soil, putting down deep roots in search of moisture and nutrients. Bicentennial. Bicentennial. I'm Sally, your guide for this tour of the Bicentennial Park. Exotic. Exotic. Next to this is the greenhouse, where some exotic plants and fruits are grown. Observer. Observer. But in fact, Observers have noted that once the babies have hatched out of their eggs, they have hardly any contact with their parents. Blowhole. Blowhole. The area around the blowhole is also particularly sensitive, and captive animals often object strongly to being touched there. Expand. Expand. Is there spare land next door to expand later if necessary? Obstacle. Obstacle. There was only one obstacle to Dutch domination. Blurred. Blurred. If any of the following occur, discontinue taking the medicine and contact your doctor. Dizziness, vomiting, blurred vision. Expedition. Expedition. One is as a scientific base for expeditions and research, and the other is an information centre. Ozone. Ozone. A second important area is monitoring the size of the hole in the ozone layer above Antarctica, since this is an indicator of global ultraviolet radiation levels. Bonus. Bonus. Pay includes any items paid through the payroll, such as overtime, bonus payments, commission, and tips and gratuities. Exploitation. Exploitation. It allowed scientists to communicate with other socially privileged thinkers while protecting their work from unwanted exploitation. Orchestra. Orchestra. The orchestra and National Theatre Company were involved in the planning of the project. Boom. Boom. But one force behind the import-export boom has passed all but unnoticed: the rapidly falling cost of getting goods to market. Explore. Explore. The caves were first explored in 1887 by a local Maori chief, Tane Tinarau, and an English surveyor, Fred Mace. Organic. Organic. This is the process by which plants use energy from the sun to convert carbon from soil or water into organic material for growth. Bounce. Bounce. The eyes have to detect the tiny fraction of the light that bounces off each part of the scene. Expose. Expose. The rowers at the bottom had the most uncomfortable position, as they were under the other rowers and were exposed to the water entering through the oar holes. Orthodox. Orthodox. In many other industrialised countries, orthodox and alternative medicine have worked hand in glove for years. Extend. Extend. The consequences of our water policies extend beyond jeopardising human health. Pest. Pest. CIBC also serves as a clearinghouse for the export and import of biological agents for pest control worldwide. Brake. Brake. The only slight problems with this cot were that it had no brakes. External. External. Is it possible that the external environment can affect a guest's well-being? Pharmaceutical. Pharmaceutical. Are doctors to blame for the escalating extravagance of pharmaceutical marketing? Breakthrough. Breakthrough. An intellectual breakthrough, brilliant though it may be, does not automatically ensure that the transition is made from theory to practice. Extinct. Extinct. Species are becoming extinct in vast numbers. Phase. Phase. Little was known about the transport demands of the rural households, so Phase 1 between December 1985 and December 1987 focused on research. Bronze. Bronze. The bronze scheme would probably suit you best. Extract. Extract. The Japanese began extracting it from natural resources. Photosynthesis. Photosynthesis. The second reason light is important to organisms is that it is essential for photosynthesis. Bud. Bud. Farmers and gardeners have known for hundreds of years how responsive plants are to temperature. Warm winters cause many trees and flowers to bud early. Extraordinary. Extraordinary. The breeding season of some plants can be delayed to extraordinary lengths. Phrase. Phrase. Choose one phrase from the list of phrases A to J below to complete each of the following sentences. Bug. Bug. Such waste puts farmers on a chemical treadmill. Bugs and weeds become reactant to poisons, so next year's poisons must be more lethal. Fabric. Fabric. The once outrageous shapes and colours of an artist like Paul Klee so soon appeared on the fabrics we wear. Physically. Physically. The activity is too demanding physically. Bulb. Bulb. It has a fixed energy budget, about the same as a 40-watt light bulb, so it has evolved to work as efficiently as possible. Fabulous. Fabulous. Fabulous furniture has been Australia's wided choice of furniture. Pillar. Pillar. In other words, a 5-storey pagoda contains not even one pillar that travels right up through the building to carry the structural loads from the top to the bottom. Burrow. Burrow. Most species burrow into the soil and bury dung in tunnels directly underneath the pats, which are hollowed out from within. Faculty. Faculty. I'm in the business faculty. Pilot. Pilot. The 4-year pilot study included 380 families who were about to have their first child. Bypass. Bypass. Working with the family rather than bypassing the parents is the most efficient way of helping children get off to the best possible start in life. Fancy. Fancy. Fancy Foods will pay $10 for each jar returned unopened and $5 for each jar already opened. Pleasurable. Pleasurable. Creative discovery being pleasurable, humans have learned to find ways of milking this natural response. Calculation. Calculation. Some ants can find their way by making calculations based on distance and position. Fiction. Fiction. Overwhelmingly, the lives recorded, at least in film fiction, have been American. Package. Package. For example, the Scottish Council for Research in Education produced a package of materials. Cap. Cap. During quiet periods, volcanoes cap themselves with their own lava by forming a powerful cone from the molten rocks slopping over the rim of the crater. Flaw. Flaw. But there was a crucial flaw in this argument, one routinely overlooked in more conventional areas of science. Panel. Panel. Architects love it because large panels can be bolted together to make transparent walls, and turning it into ceilings and floors is almost as easy. Carbohydrate. Carbohydrate. This energy is provided by foods which are high in carbohydrate and fat. Flexible. Flexible. Finally, remember to be enthusiastic and show that you can be flexible. Pedestrian. Pedestrian. Harrison decided to create pedestrian access to the building and to make use of the presence of water on the site. Census. Census. We might, for example, conduct a census. Flop. Flop. A move instantly dubbed the Fosbury Flop. Pendulum. Pendulum. In short, the Shimba shearer was acting like an enormous stationary pendulum. Ceramic. Ceramic. Rather than supplying disposable plastic cups in your workplace, get ceramic mugs that can be reused. Flourish. Flourish. The new world will largely depend on human creativity, and creativity flourishes where people come together face to face. Perceive. Perceive. If participation and the culture are incongruous, employees are likely to perceive the participation process as manipulative and be negatively affected by it. Chaos. Chaos. There was no standard way of speaking or writing, and no agreement as to the best way of bringing some order to the chaos of English spelling. Forage. Forage. In one experiment, foraging teams were able to use their sense of smell to find food. Permission. Permission. And as it's on a historical site, it'd need to get special planning permission. Chop. Chop. The stone axes used to chop down trees to make these dwellings were far superior to any that the Stone Age hunter-gatherers used. Foster. Foster. An early scientific journal fostered a new kind of writing based on short descriptions of specific experiments. Personnel. Personnel. When the personnel department is choosing between applicants, they need to look for someone who's broken the mould and can think for themselves. Clown. Clown. There are no animals, just very talented clowning and acrobatic routines. Foundation. Foundation. This course gives a foundation for a career in caring for children, the elderly, or people with special needs. Perspective. Perspective. Viewed from this angle, humour is just a form of creative insight, a sudden leap to a new perspective. Fragile. Fragile. Fragile mountain forests should be given priority in research programmes. Plough. Plough. Before the cereal crops could be planted, it would have been necessary to clear the forest and to break the ground by ploughing. Coarse. Coarse. Australia's native dung beetles are scrub and woodland dwellers, specialising in coarse marsupial droppings and avoiding the soft cattle dung. Frame. Frame.
Studies of these have taught us that ancient Roman shipbuilders built the outer hull first, then proceeded with the frame and the rest of the ship.
Polish. Polish. However, after the axe had been chipped into shape, they needed water and sand for grinding and polishing. Coincide. Coincide. The Yam period coincided with the end of the last ice age. freeze, freeze. Huge icebergs break off the continent each year, while in winter half the surrounding ocean freezes over, which means its size almost doubles. Potentially, potentially. Volcanoes are potentially world news, especially the quiet ones. Collaborate, collaborate. The Australian Institute of Sport employs more than 100 sports scientists and doctors and collaborates with scores of others in universities and research centres. Freight, freight. Freight rates and cargo handling schedules become insignificant factors in deciding where to make the product. Premier, premier. Australia's premier mountain biking guidebook, taking you through a host of national parks and state forests. Combat, combat. New research is now unravelling the ways in which bacteria aid digestion, regulate our immune systems, affect our behaviour and even combat obesity. Fulfil, fulfil. There is a need to recognise the importance of access to credit for impoverished young people seeking to fulfil economic needs. Premise, premise. The plan is to find new premises for it near the theatre, and we've had difficulty finding somewhere suitable. Companion, companion. Supersaver. Half-price seats are available for people with disabilities and one companion. Fundamental, fundamental. It undermines a fundamental human quality. Prescribe, prescribe. They have regularly prescribed alternative remedies. Concur, concur. Dr. Patrick Storr concurs that orthodox doctors could learn a lot about bedside manner from alternative therapists. Grinding, grinding. Over the sound of roaring engines, rushing air vents and grinding generators, a dog barks. Presume, presume. I presume you'd want a manual? Conjunction, conjunction. The next factor to be determined is whether the goals should be assigned by a manager or collectively set in conjunction with the employees. Gear, gear. All the training is then geared towards making the athlete hit those targets, both overall and for each segment of the race. Prey, prey. While most other animals, including fish, hunt their prey by means of their eyesight, sharks hunt essentially by smell. Conquer, conquer. In the 11th century, in 1066 to be precise, the Normans conquered England. Gender, gender. One aspect that we haven't yet considered is gender. Printer, printer. The other thing he was saying last week was that his computer printer had broken. Contend, contend. Rather, they contend, it was almost certainly the result of climatic shifts. Gene, gene. India's lions are particularly vulnerable because they have a limited gene pool. Priority, priority. Fragile mountain forests should be given priority in research programmes. Contrary, contrary. It is worth noting that, contrary to popular perception, rowers were not slaves, but mostly Roman citizens enrolled in the military. Generate, generate. Compared with ordinary coal, new clean coals may generate power. Productive, productive. Help participants develop critical life skills as well as productive business. Counsel, counsel. Today's Health Council is presented by Paula Clayburgh. Genius. Genius. Johnson was a poet and critic who raised common sense to the height of genius. Prone. Prone. When an organisation is shrinking, the best and most mobile workers are prone to leave voluntarily. Crane. Crane. The invention of the container crane made it possible to load and unload containers without capsizing the ship. Germinate. Germinate. For example, desert annuals germinate, flower and seed whenever suitable rainfall occurs, regardless of the day length. Property. Property. Nobody has ever enough money, so there is an overwhelming temptation to go for the cheapest property. Creep. Creep. You'll have to start adjusting to the mounting pressure as the deadline for that first assignment creeps up on you. Giant. Giant. The triumphant reign of pterosaurs ended with this giant flyer. Proportion. Proportion. Forest decline is still poorly understood, but leads to the loss of a high proportion of a tree's needles or leaves. Critic. Critic. Johnson was a poet and critic who raised common sense to the heights of genius. Gradual. Gradual. We're not talking about gradual evolution here. Proposal. Proposal. Instead, the proposal advocated the creation of urban villages at hundreds of sites, mostly around railway stations. Crown. Crown. Here's a hat that looks like a crown. Grant. Grant. Each employee is granted 1 extra day as a personal holiday at the time of hire and at the beginning of each calendar year. Prospect. Prospect. Another factor that may boost the prospects for AI in the near future is that investors are now looking for firms using clever technology. Culminate. Culminate. We stay near there for day 7 because then comes the hardest day, walking through very mountainous country, but culminating in a swim in the Parter Falls. Graze. Graze. Where the mining is underground, the surface area can be simultaneously used for forests, cattle grazing and crop raising. Psychological. Psychological. Apart from self-help therapy, such as regular exercise, there are psychological treatments. Gross. Gross. Older cars were the worst offenders, though a sizable number of quite new cars were also identified as gross polluters. They were simply badly tuned. Pump. Pump. Water is pumped from the irrigation canals into the lagoons. Curtain. Curtain. We're experimenting a bit with the time the curtain goes up. Guarantee. Guarantee. Sign your name on the list on the library bulletin board to guarantee a place, as they are very popular. Purchase. Purchase. In particular, it will be helpful if they can give information about the place to purchase of the product. Cyclist. Cyclist. A lot of their work comes down to measurement, everything from the exact angle of a swimmer's dive to the second-by-second power output of a cyclist. Guideline. Guideline. If you use a personal computer, there are plenty of guidelines available from the government on posture, angles, lighting and the like. Pursue. Pursue. He said he and Crick had succeeded because they were aware that they weren't the most intelligent of the scientists pursuing the answer. Dash, dash. Then I dashed the writing off very quickly. Habitat, habitat. Possible causes for the decline include habitat destruction, pollution, and changes in climate. Qualify, qualify. In fact, to qualify as a witness in a court of law, a man had to be able to count to 9. Dazzling, dazzling. The feature which makes fireflies and glowworms so appealing is their ability to produce an often dazzling display of light. Halt, halt. They work to find a way to halt the further spread of re-emergence of diseases in vulnerable populations. Quantity, quantity. Throughout the first 3 quarters of the 20th century, the quantity of fresh water consumed per person doubled on average. Decent, decent. I have also bought myself decent second-hand clothes and shoes. Harsh, harsh. The harsh surroundings saw many who tried to settle there pushed to their limits, although some were successful. Questionnaire, questionnaire. The box below gives a list of responses to the questionnaire discussed in Reading Passage 1. Denote, denote. By the 7th century, 100 was denoted as huntiontig, or 10 times 10. Hatch, hatch. By the time it is due to hatch, the glowworm's light organ is fully developed, and its glow signals that the egg will soon hatch. Radical, radical. Companies in Britain, as well as elsewhere, should consider radical changes to their directors' roles. Dense, dense. Land tortoises were represented by a dense cluster of points towards the top. Herb, herb. He explains that it is sold in capsules, tablets, lozenges, and mixed with herbs. Random, random. The 4 divisions were assigned to 2 experimental programs on a random basis. Deplete, deplete. As chlorophyll is depleted, other colours that have been dominated by it throughout the summer begin to be revealed. Heritage, heritage. It is realised that the world's cultural heritage is a diminishing resource which holds different meanings for different people. Reckon, reckon. He reckons part of the pleasure we get from art stems from the creative process behind the work. Depressed, depressed. They became so depressed and lacking in energy that their work and social life are affected. Highlight, highlight. Key features are clearly identified, while unexpected differences are highlighted and illustrated. Recommend, recommend. Which course would you recommend for people with the following career interests? Derelict, derelict. Creating the park required the demolition of lots of derelict buildings on the site. Hollow, hollow. Most species burrow into the soil and bury dung in tunnels directly underneath the pats, which are hollowed out from within. Recreational, recreational. It is best to make a weekly allocation of your time, making sure that you have enough left for recreational activities or simply to be with yourself. Detective, detective. This TV drama is about a young private detective employed by a team of New York businessmen who send her to Brazil to look into a series of hotel robberies. horizontal, horizontal. When it moves more quickly, it may flow out in thick horizontal sheets. Register, register. I'd like to register for the full 3 days. Devastate, devastate. He was no longer on speaking terms with his brother and had been devastated by the death at the age of 7 of his elder daughter, Josephine. Hut, hut. Their villages were little more than clusters of thatched huts. Forge, forge. At that time, local craftsmen first built an iron forge just behind the village here on the bend of the river. Diameter, diameter. The British rocket differed from the Indian version in that it was completely encased in a stout iron cylinder terminating in a conical head measuring 1 metre in diameter. Identical, identical. Research relating to identical twins has highlighted how significant inherited characteristics can be for an individual's life. Foyer, foyer. The first thing people will see when they go in is that the foyer has been repainted in the original green and gold. Divorce, divorce. The charts below give information about USA marriage and divorce rates. Ignore, ignore. However, this does not mean that in future they will be ignored. Fraud, fraud. So crimes like theft by employees, things like embezzlement or fraud against one's actual employer, are excluded according to this definition. Domain, domain. Open publication had dangers in putting into the public domain preliminary ideas which had not yet been fully exploited by their author. Illegal, illegal. Some may also earn income through begging or through theft and other illegal activities. Frontier, frontier. This means that a forest policy is vital, that it must transcend national frontiers and generations of people. Dominance, dominance. Which 3 possible reasons for American dominance of the film industry are given in the text? Illiterate, illiterate. By 1985, about 300,000 illiterate adults from all over the country, many of whom had never attended primary school, had learnt how to read, write and use numbers. Fruitful, fruitful. The assumption that the tropical ecosystem of Amazonia has been created solely by natural forces has led to some fruitful discoveries. Illustration, illustration. Was that the article with the illustrations of early stages of plant development? Insist, insist. Many athletes are not getting the best nutrition, even through supplements. Yesis insists. Dose, dose. It has proved toxic at some doses in animals and so cannot be used in humans. Imbalance, imbalance. Merely restricting tourism cannot be the solution to the imbalance, because people's desire to see new places will not just disappear. Fumes, fumes. This means pedestrians waiting on the pavement to cross the railway line don't have to breathe in car fumes. Drill, drill. You need quite a lot of equipment actually. A hand drill, an old record, a pin or needle, some paper and a bolt. Implicit, implicit. Second, the implicit theories of scientific investigators ultimately give rise to their explicit theories. Furnish. Furnish. These were built for the workers towards the end of the 18th century, and they're still furnished from that period. Impose. Impose. Many experts believe that the best way to counter this trend is to impose water charges based on the real cost of supplies. Garage. Garage. Those rooms constructed at the front of the houses should be garages. Elusive. Elusive. Individual systems can play chess or transcribe speech, but a general theory of machine intelligence still remains elusive. Incentive. Incentive. Also, the incentive should be something the individual actually wants, and this isn't always just money. Gentle. Gentle. It was a slow, gentle eruption. Inquire. Inquire. I've been referred to you because I'm inquiring about the refresher courses. Glance. Glance. At first glance, playing animals do appear to be practicing the complex manoeuvres they will need in adulthood. Entrepreneur. Entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur is not for everyone, nor for every street child. Incorporate. Incorporate.
How to incorporate it into your own work in an acceptable way.
Glide. Glide. As pterosaurs got larger, they discovered the benefits of gliding on air currents, making use of a free energy source. Eradicate. Eradicate. We discovered a few of them in Queensland once and eradicated them. Indication. Indication. This could be taken as an indication that there is no longer such a big change in role from single to married person, and therefore no need for a public change in sign. Glory. Glory. In Scandinavia, the Swedish cinema had a brief period of glory, notably with powerful epic films and comedies. Escalate. Escalate. Are doctors to blame for the escalating extravagance of pharmaceutical marketing? Indigenous. Indigenous. In fact, there's evidence that Australia's indigenous people practice regular burning of bushland for thousands of years before the arrival of the Europeans. Harbour. Harbour.
Many studies have shown that children harbour misconceptions about pure curriculum science.
Evaporate. Evaporate. It evaporates water through its leaves, and that means that the temperature of the leaves is never very far from our own body temperature. Induce. Induce. When the next generation reaches their teens, they might not want to be induced into the old traditions. Harness. Harness. Harnessing the wind would not have been a problem for accomplished sailors like the Egyptians. Evenly. Evenly. Moulds had to be carefully designed so that the molten bakelite would flow evenly and completely into the mould. Industrialise. Industrialise. As countries industrialise and their citizens become more prosperous, their individual water usage increases rapidly. exacerbate. In particular, the problem of information overload, exacerbated by the growth of email and the explosion of the number of web pages, means infection. Infection. Any infections of ear, nose, throat, mouth, chest or skin should also be reported to a member of the personnel management team. Heal. Heal. Constrain ligaments in the back which can take months to heal. Expertise. Expertise. Each person comes to the programme and course with his or her own plans, and these need not even concern the acquisition of marketing expertise as such. Infrastructure. Infrastructure. However, public infrastructure did not keep pace with urban sprawl, causing massive congestion problems which now make commuting times far higher. Ignite. Ignite. This has ignited public debate about AI. Faint. Faint. The larva's light is much fainter than the adult female's, but it can still be seen more than 5 meters away. Initiate. Initiate. The holiday schedule is initiated annually. Imaginative. Imaginative. Hypotheses, said Medivar in 1964, are imaginative and inspirational in character. They are adventures of the mind. Fasten. Fasten. A long cylindrical tube was propped up by 2 sticks and fastened to the top of the launcher. Innovative. Innovative. That was really innovative from a stylistic point of view. Impurity. Impurity. However, if the glass contains nickel sulfide impurities, crystals of nickel sulfide are formed. A sudden leap to a new perspective. Incubator. Incubator. The farmers can use incubators and hatched chicks are nourished well. Filter. Filter. Trees filter the wind and considerably reduce it. Flaming. Flaming. And other ancient civilizations certainly knew about kites. As early as 1250 BC, the Chinese were using them to deliver messages and dump flaming debris on their foes. Flap. Flap. This creature would have spread its limbs and used flaps of skin attached to its limbs and body to help it to land gently on the ground. Flash. Flash. When large thunderclouds are generating the intense electrical fields that cause lightning flashes. Fleet. Fleet. Between 1985 and 1996, for example, America's freight railways dramatically reduced their employment, trackage, and their fleets of locomotives.